what was happening in the comments section?
We were discussing about Liverpool, because there is my friend Christopher. He's also from Liverpool,
Okay,
and someone will say, "Oh, The-Frey is a Scouser."
I'm not a
Uh,
Scouser. This
you're
is
not a
not.
Scouser.
This is not a Scouse accent.
Oh, but you're from Liverpool.
No, no. Uh,
You
Scout.
told me.
Scouse accent is very very different. I'm from all over, but I'm from the south of England. A bit Cornwall, a bit the West Country, a few
Where are you
places.
now?
I am in the northwest of England, in that area, but not in Liverpool.
Okay, but you must have in the like one of the first interview told me you are near Liverpool or something. That
Yeah, because well, I mean, the whole of the northwest of England is not a big
yeah.
area. It's not a big area. So I don't know if you're very familiar with the geography of the northwest of England, which is not an interesting subject for your crypto viewers. But there's two major cities, Manchester and Liverpool, and there's no
Mhm.
countryside between them. So they're kind of all part of the same conurbation, like the same
Mhm.
larger metropolitan area. It's quite spread out. So the two of them combined, I think, is over 10 million people. It's a really, really big, large conurbation. And it doesn't really end. It kind of spreads all the way out into the Cheshire farmland. There's not loads of countryside until you get kind of down past Warrington,
Yeah.
maybe. It's a very, very, very large built up area. And then north of Greater Manchester, there's several other large towns that have all been absorbed into the wider city, like Rochdale, Oldham, all those sorts of places like Bolton.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really like the whole of the northwest of England is just kind of like one crazy big blob of towns and cities without like not lots of countryside. It's just all this big coastal plain full of towns and stuff, and lots of football clubs. Um,
Yeah. I so like I feel like I was spreading misinformation because like but you do sound different, as someone said that you sound posh, but I'm horrible with the accents. Like I'm notoriously mixing up. Like when someone is from New Zealand and speaking to me, I'm like, oh, you're British. Like I can't, you know.
yeah, you get that a lot in Australia. Sorry, you get that a lot in America. Actually, people think you're from basically if you're not like, oh, come on, Squire, let's have a pint of beer and a fish and chips.
Yeah,
People think you're basically from Australia.
because it's
And they're
like
like, are
this.
you from Australia? And you're like, no, this is not an Australian accent. As
Yeah.
viewers of Game of Nodes will know, because they've heard Null. Null is Australian. That's what Australian people sound like. Um, it's very, very different accent.
I mean, when I have two people speaking, I will recognize. But like when I meet Aussie, I easily confuse him with someone somewhere from UK, because UK has so many different accents. But I
There's a
do
lot,
know
yeah.
the north of England a little bit. I told you I used to live in Newcastle,
Oh yeah, yeah,
work in the bar. That's where my English skills come from.
yeah.
Um,
Newcastle, lovely place. Absolutely
uh,
great city.
I love that place. I'd love to visit. I haven't been there for like 6 years, and I kind of miss that. I would like to
Oh,
see
it's
how did
changed.
it
It's changed
change.
quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's really good. They pedestrianized a big chunk of the city center.
Hmm.
There's loads. They've invested a bit in some of the buildings and stuff
Yeah.
have been tidied up a little bit. Like I rode up the east coast of England a few weeks ago. No, Christ, when was it? After Juno Prop 16, I had one day off basically
Hmm.
in between Prop 16 and then maybe like the end of June. It was some crazy time. Like literally, I had one day off, and in that day, I cycled up the east coast of England from like um, quite a way south of Newcastle, all the way up through Newcastle, all the way up
Yeah.
into. Do you know where Lindisfarne is? Like Holy Island,
No, I don't.
where the Vikings used to raid. But basically,
Right.
cycled all the way up there. Um, and when I was going through Newcastle, I was like, "Holy crap, it's really nice here now." And they had loads of really nice like bike lanes and pedestrianized bits, and I was like,
Yeah.
"This is a really, really lovely city now." And I already was a big fan of Newcastle, so
Yeah. I mean the area around is also like quite beautiful. Out of villages, the Durham is just next to it.
oh yeah,
The other beautiful city of Sunderland.
yeah. I got
That
some friends from
no,
Sunderland actually, and
but
from Durham.
so you're from you Mackem,
No, no, I've
Mackem.
got friends from there. My wife's from Durham originally as well.
Oh,
So
she's Mackem. I spoke to
don't
one
say that to people
recently.
from Durham.
you know,
They got big fans of that.
I'm sad because I had very nice friend. She was Mackem, like we're quite close, and I lost the touch with her after I moved out. But my England experience is like very shallow. Like okay, your wife heard it.
Yeah.
So um I lived in Newcastle. I visited like Sunderland, Durham. I think I visited. Did I visit York? Some like coast near Newcastle, Edinburgh, and I never really spent like I only did transits through London. Never been to Liverpool, Manchester, nowhere. Like my experience is just this cities up north, which is
Yeah,
quite
they're very
unusual,
different. I mean, they're very different places as well. Like, yeah, obviously Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool, all very industrial places. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas like York, York, Durham, Edinburgh, all kind of very old seats of
Hmm.
government, castles, cathedrals, that kind of thing, and they're very beautiful cities, and it's very different like kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
vibe, isn't it? Like you kind of either get an industrial city with actual jobs,
Mhm.
or you get a very beautiful city with not very much but a university and
Yeah.
tourists. That's kind of the English way. Um, I think you probably just heard actually my wife just came in, I think, offering a cup of tea because that is exactly what British
Yeah.
people are like. But I've actually already made one already in anticipation of this. So
Yeah, it was my first experience with the tea with milk, because we do drink tea without milk. And then when because I actually I met my wife in Newcastle, so like Newcastle
oh yeah,
is actually like very special place. She used to go to Newcastle University, and then her experience was when the like first time she came to Poland that we drink tea without milk was weird, because she's from Hong Kong and they also have the same milk tea, like but I must go. I still have few very like close friends in Newcastle, living there. So
should go. Great
I'm
place.
planning. They keep visiting me in Poland. I mean, one he visiting me in Poland for like past 3 times, and I still haven't gone there. That's like how lazy I am. But nice English chat, beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, like so for some who doesn't get Sunderland, it's like known for being like very picturesque, beautiful place. It's like really good, um with very low unemployment rate. It's
dark, dark. So since we last talked, Dom, you're the biggest validator in the cosmos, right?
yeah. Just I'm getting there. Like I'm being very influential.
Yeah.
In active set, something I cannot say about you. You can't just get there, but I can use my influence to actually put you there. I'm also on Juno,
Yeah, I
but
see that.
I don't seem to enjoy much of a trust of the community, I would say. And also I want to be open. This is just white label validator. I can't do it. I never used Linux in my life. So the guy who also have the validator called Ted Lotto, he runs it. Like, so yeah. Um,
There's
I
always
don't think.
there's always time to become a hero and learn Linux. Like everybody has to do it at some point. It's
Yeah,
inescapable. It's the only thing they won't be able to get the AIs to do is to remember arcane Linux commands.
like this is I spoke about this with my validator, and like you are a developer, like probably I would say maybe quite accomplished with like good experience, right? And many people in crypto like you, Callum, or whoever, if I chat to you about crypto, there is the assumption that I'm probably know something. So if like I would speak of validator, oh, it's such a basic thing, so there's assumption like everyone can do it. And it's hard for some people within crypto like to wrap the head around, no, this guy can't do shit, this is me. Of course it doesn't mean I shouldn't learn this, but like my guy, we have the checks on Telegram. It's like, so he makes sure it's reliable. So if I would learn how to spin the node, there was actually much more to it to make sure that missing blocks is the first things, but the other things, like I would have to learn.
Well,
So even
it
if I
cuts a number of ways though. I mean, there's obviously Blockchain has built a whole bunch of like pretty
Mhm.
good tooling, which is very, very easy to use. Just containerized. You can run Tender Duty, and Tender Duty 2 is now out, which is very, very, very cool. And the flip side of like knowing how to build this stuff and work with it is that you attempt to, like, for example, roll your own monitoring, right? Because you know how to do it, so you just go, okay, well, I'll write something that we'll do that, rather than just using Tender Duty and using the tools that other people have built. So I think that's one thing actually as a validator that we've had to gradually do, is come off of solutions that we built ourselves, because at the time we were like, there's like 8 different things you could use and we just need to get it working. So we just like rolled something ourselves, moved on, and then you come back a couple of months later and you're like, actually, everybody, there's a lot of mind share around this particular piece of tooling. It's probably better than what we've rolled ourselves because more people are using it, it's got more features, etc. And it's that kind of like not re-implementing the wheel type thing, which I think sometimes, if you maybe are more confident in your skill in a certain area, you can fall prey to that. Like, oh, I'll just do this. I'll just knock it out.
Yeah.
And actually, that's true even of the automation side of things, I guess. Which is like, I think the two groups of people who are most probably guilty of maybe not automating things about their validator setup are people who are very inexperienced and are just kind of sort of copy and pasting commands to get through it, and people who are very, very experienced and who are just like, oh, I can literally, whatever happens, I can fix it. So done, and I'll worry about it later. And both of those people have the same brittleness about their setup. It's just that one, I suppose, the benefit of being more experienced is that you can be in a position where you're confident you can recover from whatever might happen.
I'm still before the place where I could copy commands, copy and paste commands, right? So
Are you on a MacBook?
Yeah.
So
I use
Command
MacBook.
C, Command V, I think.
Command
There you go.
C, Command V. Yeah. But I mean, like, when doing this and seeing the command in Linux, what I mean, I never used Linux, right? So my first step would be actually, hey, use Linux. That's how it looks. Then learn how to spin up the node, right? And probably even more before that to actually be more comfortable with that.
I don't know. It's pretty simple. You just like buy a refurb Lenovo ThinkPad. Great laptop. Put a dual boot Ubuntu on it, and just start booting into it every day to do work and do stuff like generally, and then you'll realize that like it's exactly the same as any OS really. The only difference is that occasionally you have to open a command prompt, and then when you get used to the command prompt, you'll go like, oh, is this the same command prompt that you'd use on a server? Yeah, it is. And to be honest, it's not more complicated than that. Like everybody is, I think every junior developer who first has to do server ops, which is actually increasingly uncommon these days, I guess, because of the way that technology has gone elsewhere, which is heavily in favor of containerization and automation. I even like 4 or 5 years ago, I was working with engineers who were maybe younger, and because of how heavily automated and how heavily cloud platform based the engineering tasks and kind of environment had gotten, they weren't super familiar with how to do stuff, DevOps stuff, sysadmin stuff on Linux, just because they're never run bare metal servers. It just, after maybe 2012, it's more common that you don't do that, or maybe 2014, something like that. I feel like there was a tipping point somewhere in the mid 2010s where the tooling around containerization and then the advent of like serverless stuff meant that people increasingly, especially newer developers, haven't had to worry about that stuff. So I don't think you're like necessarily alone in maybe being intimidated by feeling like there's this whole scary world trapped inside of a web server, but it's all just like all of the modern internet is just containers running on a EC2 instance somewhere, mostly,
You
or a
know,
bare metal server.
being outside of this, like not being developer and being in crypto is a little bit like um being handicapped a little bit, you know. Shouldn't say that, but you know, the when it comes to like crypto fluency, it's quite difficult, right? If you can't read code or something, this is
But
like,
I
you
think
know, secondary class citizen. Oh, handicapped, it's not the right word, it could be offensive, but
yeah, but
secondary
I think
citizens.
it kind of goes all the way down though, doesn't it? Because like if you're an engineer who's mainly an application level engineer, which is like my background,
Mhm.
application and operations, um, I don't, for example, have a computer science degree, although I have taught myself enough computer science to understand what all the concepts and things are that I'm looking at. But if you don't have a master's degree and you don't understand advanced cryptography, there are times you just hit a brick wall in crypto. And so I think like it comes back to being a mindset thing. Like there's any number of things, even when you're a developer and you think you know what you're doing, there's always something else that will come along and make you feel like you're an idiot. So a lot of, if in fact, and this is something when I've trained junior developers, not necessarily young developers, but junior developers, or help train or help mentor or whatever, one of the biggest things is, and some people can get over this and some people can't, or maybe can't is a strong word, but like have a lot more difficulty getting over it, is this idea that like there's never an end to the stuff that you're going to feel bad about. So you kind of have to feel good about the wins when you get them, because sometimes even as a developer who's been doing this over a decade or whatever, you hit a problem and ultimately you're against a deadline and you fix it via any number of like complex things and looking up forum threads and looking through old email threads and GitHub issues and Stack Overflow and stuff, and you never really 100% understand how you fixed it, but you do fix it. And that's a pretty awful feeling when you get something fixed and you succeed in getting past the deadline and everything works, but you are still not 100% sure that it will not recur, or you could really guard against it happening in the future. And those things are always going to happen because the problem space is so large. And part of like, I guess, being okay with this as a thing you can do is that you just have to kind of take the wins when you get them and try and learn from everything that crosses your path, but also accept that some of it is just inherently quite complicated, and it's just a means to an end, I guess.
Yeah.
You have to have a goal in mind, and you're ultimately, as a developer, just trying to get something past that goal and then move on.
I guess I do have to try at some point, because that I actually like not doing this is kind of excuse, you know. Like my background is retoucher and I never studied for this. I actually learned because I wanted to learn, and ended up like retouching for like top magazines like Vogue and others, right? So, and even like did the job for Nike and stuff. But at some point, I couldn't do anything, right? So I guess the same is like with,
Yeah, right, exactly.
if you just try.
I would have no idea how to do that,
Yeah.
but equally, what you learn from doing anything technical where you constantly are faced with things you've never seen before, is that you kind of just have to learn how to believe that you are going to solve whatever the problem is.
Hmm.
Like you just kind of like, so I don't know how to do retouching, but I also know that I could work it out now. I don't know how I would get there, but I know I would. um it's the same as like like I guess if you do it long enough, you quite often end up like, I build electronic stuff as well, like as in solder, and I've done some
Yeah.
electronic hardware stuff in the past as well. I used to have a small business doing um building a hardware guitar equipment, for example, and that was again something I didn't really know, just worked it out. um but
You just have
it's
to
all the same thing.
keep
Right,
doing it
exactly.
like
You
every
just keep
day.
bashing
So
your
like,
head against a problem.
no, like this is actually the Wacom tablet, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
this is basic stuff for retouching, and if you start and try to go from to this from the mouse, it's completely unnatural. You can't hold the pen and do it with pen. And it's like people would ask me, I'm like, you have to do it like for a few weeks every day, and it will feel natural when you will keep doing this, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
um
Like anything.
what do you think of white label validators?
I understand why they exist, um, but I don't. I think ultimately, if you're a white level validator and you're not ultimately looking to run your own hardware, then that is a problem. Would be my opinion,
Yeah, yeah,
honest
yeah.
opinion.
It's kind of the way to make some extra money for me, right? Like that's
Yeah,
I wasn't taking sponsorships. I don't even know if someone would be interested. I guess someone may be somewhere sneak, but that seems like a good way of like trying to make some extra money. It's not much. It's like I think $600 from all of them, but like 200 goes for paying, so it's not really. And I did this because I actually quit. Kind of like I got so involved in crypto, I stopped doing retouching. So it's like I actually have to make some money. I mean, maybe I
yeah,
could still do retouching, but like it's like I decided to is Callum starting a validator? Maybe it's better question for Callum, but it would be also good way as Callum is working in this field to make some extra, because Needlecast is big validator on Juno. And I believe this is like financial incentive for you. Hey, I'm making here money, but I'm also developer, so I'm making sure that Juno is successful because that's kind of my work. I would imagine this is your full-time work right now. Um,
yeah. Well, so
so
we do a bunch of corporate contracting and all sorts of other stuff. But during Prop 16, we essentially had to get rid of all of our other work because there was too much. There was too much on. I think I said somewhere on maybe on Twitter that between whatever it was March 9th and maybe mid-May we had like a couple of days off, but it was basically 7 days a week for 10 days for 10
yeah,
days, 7 days a week for 10 weeks, like that plus the cyber attack plus the Unity contract plus Cos and Wasm getting to version 1. There were like what 3 critical security patches in that period of time, and all the test nets and everything. Like it was just it was one of those where there were people, we had other corporate stuff, like kind of business to business contracts for
yeah,
consultancy, and you can't just like drop out of a meeting where you're talking about like a 3-year staffing plan and then just immediately be into like, right, I'm going to go do validator maintenance and stuff like that. It was just 2 completely different worlds, and everything
yeah,
was just kind of colliding. So for Needlecast, that was like a big. I think a lot of validators and a lot of sort of maybe career engineers have had that reckoning at some point where they sort of go, am I going to do my other job or am I going to do this thing? And it's quite hard to know
and
when, um, yeah, I guess like when the right time is to jump and all of that stuff. And of course, for us, because we're just mere mortals. We're not as smart as the great Don Kryptonian. We jumped full time into it just as the market crashed, because we're
yeah,
like universe brain business legends. So that was also could have been timed better, but uh, this is why I think, and we've covered this a lot on Game of Nodes, like why, as a validator, knowing like kind of what's that really shitty, time in the market beats timing the market. Like I think you always, as a validator, need to be like you're cashing out some crypto into fiat, putting some aside to pay for servers and pay for staff and pay for all these sorts of things, because you just if you're always FOMOing, you're just gonna it's gonna kill you because
yeah.
there's so much noise.
In so like of course I don't make anything. I don't sell anything because I think it would be easy thing to come after me right now, right? So I would rather cash out from my personal holdings now, which are not known. But it would be totally fine for validators actually to cash out all the time. that because I see validators in similar manner, like miners, right? Like we actually do support the network, and this reward is just for us, and we live off this. And if we change to fiat, if the market is good, we sell, we expand.
Yeah.
And so there's no even need to talk about who sell or not. It's irrelevant. And the
And also
validators.
also bear in mind, a lot of these chains are less than a year old. So
Yeah,
a lot of the validators who, especially small independent validators, have been up on these chains for about 12 months. And most validator operations, I'd say, are between 1 and 3 people. Right? Often two kind of feels like the normal number. So that means those 2 people have done a year at this point of 24/7 pager duty, 7 days a
yeah,
week. And I know from talking to teams like that everybody is now, they've got a year in and they're like, we've survived roughly a year from the start of a lot of the test nets that were sort of February last year, January last year, to now maybe mainnetting last autumn. And people are like, okay, so we've been mainnet like 9 months on a lot of these chains now, and we're shattered. And this is what people are telling me. They're just like, we don't know how we can keep like
but it's
that level
because
of
they didn't
service, that
sell,
level of
right?
uptime.
Because
Well,
they were just selling enough to survive, and that's the reason. Because
yeah, exactly. The more you didn't plan for, or the more you, yeah, you didn't cash out, the more trouble you're in
yeah,
now. But also, engineer salaries are very high. So
yeah,
even if you, let's say, I don't know, even if you're a top 50 validator in Juno, so Needlecast has until very recently, I think, I don't know if it's Game of Nodes that's helped or whatever, but until very recently we were sort of 40 something for whatever. So
you have one of the largest delegation from the core development wallet as well.
yeah,
With
I think
nothing wrong, but
yeah. So
it's
that's,
because
I
of the
think
level of contribution I wanted. But I
that's
do
the thing
think,
that's very much changed recently. I think, with especially with the increase in the delegation amounts. But if you were like we were at that position, if you're in the 40s, let's say, which isn't what we were until relatively recently, I think even if you were cashing out pretty much everything from the start of Juno starting to
yeah,
maybe end of March or something, when the price really started collapsing, you would maybe be able to pay a year's salary for another engineer to join you.
yeah,
Um, so and like, this isn't a complaint, like that, but it's just an observation on how strange a business is when you have no idea how much money is going to be
yeah,
um, available to you as a business
yeah,
in 6 months' time, in 3 months' time, in a year's time. You just can't forecast, like, because we've been doing this a while as a business, like as in software engineering, and this the last, especially the last 18 months, like, has just been really interesting, in that all the forecasting, all the planning, all the kind of normal stuff that we'd learned how to do just doesn't work anymore.
yeah. Um, I wanted to touch on it because Juno, I imagine, being like one of the most profitable at certain point in Cosmos ecosystem because of this crazy high inflation, right? APR at over 100%. The market cap quite high, so validators, but it's very difficult to not FOMO in. But if people would be like for 3 consecutive months at the peak taking out the profits, it's maybe not as bad. And also about like your growing position, like you did probably notice that once you go public, right? So game of nodes and stuff, it does help. While
Yeah,
those
there's
who
definitely been an
stay
increase.
quiet, like Mercury or Messi, the two I actually learned from you, and I tried to shout out before. Like this was in our first chat, you gave them shout out,
Yeah.
and they don't go public. Like actually, Messi don't even have Twitter. They will struggle. Like if they would be part of the game of nodes, the story would be very different,
Well,
right?
like,
So
another example of that would be Polkachu, who, I mean, I consistently shout out as, I think, one of the, along with people like Blockpain, Polkachu,
yeah,
Lavender 5. There's obviously, however, Lavender's on Game of Nodes, but there are like a number of validators. Like the reason the original Game of Nodes cast was what it was because
yeah,
that was literally the group of validators that if something went wrong, we knew that we could just like make a Discord thread, and between like say the original Game of Nodes cast plus about five, six other validators, we could probably get to the bottom of whatever it was. They're just very, very good validators. And one of the reason I shout out Polkachu so much is and BlockPay is because they aren't regulars on Game of Nodes, and obviously Polkachu's never been on Game of Nodes. But they're very, very, very good at what they do. And maybe, and this is obviously no slight on BlockPay, who is on Twitter and does do stuff and has come on Game of Nodes, but I think maybe aren't as good at marketing themselves, but are actually doing like a lot of really good work.
I'm trying to market myself. I don't get delegations, actually. I got from Jacob, who sent me, and beyond Jacob, I got like 10k Juno from the people. And on Cosmos, my like 99% is the Kumi. So it's very controversial. But yeah, like it's also because it's I think they know, like, hey, there's the-Frey could be maybe more reliable validator, like in his, like, so that also the trust and knowing that this good validator maybe, that also help together with going public. I did learn recently that Polkachus is like one man army, and I was like, it's impossible.
I think it's basically I think Polkachu is two people, but
Okay.
mainly is one person. I think basically there's multiple people on PagerDuty potentially, and I think Polka and Polka Intern obviously are two different Twitter handles. I think Polka Intern is basically the social media management. But yeah, I mean the amount of work they do, because also they're in the Polkadot ecosystem, which is like hence the name, right? So that they actually do a lot of other validation, a lot of other places, and I certainly look at the amount of stuff they're working on and feel exhausted thinking about it.
I was sure it's like bigger company, because I was speaking even like with my validator. The problem is that the validators spin up too many nodes and they just like active on 5 of the chains, and the rest is like, hey, we don't vote, we don't give a shit. But I see Polkachu notoriously like, hey, we voted on Kusama network, and the next day on, like, they actually active on all of the chain. It's so impressive. It's so difficult to look after all of the chains, knowing what is happening on the chains and making the right decisions, right? So like,
Yeah.
that's,
I mean, it's insane. Like, I think I mentioned, like, I finally took some time off after all the silliness. I took 5 days off, right? And I came back to over 1,000 notifications, just on Telegram, and like an insane amount on Discord and blah blah blah. And you just the validators, especially the independent ones that stay on top of all of that and are running on many more chains than we are, is very, very impressive to me.
like it will be probably problem if they will speed, like, because I can imagine the one validator like having 1,000 nodes at some point if it goes the way it goes. And so yeah, there is my validator. I want to give the shout out to my validator, a very nice person. By the way, like, I want to say like how we started. I said I want to do the node on Stargaze, and I did speak with the friends as well. They offered me and stuff, and then I spoke to Josh that actually barely had any validator and a major network, and we just like had nice chat like I'm having with you, and I was like, hey, do you want to do my white label validator? And I think that's the right way. You're not on many chains. You are like Juno, Stargaze, anything else there is?
We have some upcoming ones, but no, we were on we did Kerberos for a while, and then we just that chain was a mess, and so we came off it. We evaluated Akash, and we actually spent a couple of months putting together enough to buy into the set, but then we put that on ice a little bit because we basically when we we are planning on expanding to Akash, but if we do it, we're going to do it by running on Akash. And there was some basically the SDL for a cache configuration does not currently allow for whitelist. It only allows for a global whitelist. It doesn't allow for whitelisting specific IPs, which means that we can't essentially do the whitelisting that we would like to for our remote signers. So we're using a remote signing setup, which would allow us to run the sentries on Akash, but the SDL doesn't yet support it. So we had a good conversation actually with the Akash team, and shout out to them. They were very, very responsive. And a good friend of ours at Game of Nodes, and good friend, I guess, in the sense of another Cosmos person in the UK, Tom from EcoStake, who manages Omnibus, which is a really, really cool resource for validation.
And new validator on Juno. He's just new validator on Juno.
Yes, which is also, you should 100% go and stake delegate
with Don Kryptonium, Don Kryptonium, yes,
to EcoStake. But yeah, he maintains an EcoStake maintain Cosmos Omnibus, which is a really good way of syncing Dockerized, particularly RPC nodes, but obviously also full nodes. And you can run those very, very easily on Akash. I actually did a video on the Envoy Labs channel showing you how you can get an Akash validator up and running, or an RPC anyway, in like less than 30 minutes, including get the funds in place. So we did that anyway, and then we spoke to the Akash team, and they said that they are looking at an SDL improvement at some point in the future, but at the moment, the better way would be to run a reverse proxy in front of your nodes. And that will actually be coming to Omnibus soon. So I actually kind of need to check in with Tom on that, see if he needs a hand, because I've done a lot of Docker stuff in the past and I could probably help. But when that lands, we're probably going to expand to Akash, and then we'll be up on 3 chains. There are a couple of other chains that we think are very interesting. Defund is one. Quicksilver is one. So yeah, we are only on 2 at the moment. We are considering expanding to others in Cosmos, and we're also looking at expanding to some outside of the Cosmos, but that's an entirely other discussion. A lot of it basically depends on like whether or not we can make these things financially make sense, and also expanding the actual company, just have more people on PagerDuty and all that kind of stuff, which is really boring business stuff. But yeah, we basically don't want to run any chains that we don't have a conviction in the product, and we also don't want to overextend ourselves and then like run out of cash during a bear market and look a bit stupid.
This is exactly what Don Kryptonium does. Like, I do, like, there is under Badkit Stargaze, then Juno, Nomic, and Cosmos, and I'm like, it's kind of enough. I can't focus on more chains. I come from Cosmos and Juno initially. That's my main interest. If I'm gonna go on Comdex, I don't give a shit about this chain, so I will not be active there, right? So like, it's
devastating.
It's
you don't give a shit about Comdex. Why not?
I just don't. I didn't really. I don't know. Like, it's this kind of rhetoric when Comdex appeared, and maybe it was from Shilin. Like, imagine the commodities market is 17 trillion, and the price of Comdex is in the 20 million market cap, and I'm like, those two things don't have to go in pair. The token of Comdex doesn't equal the commodities, and I was like, I just didn't like the rhetoric that they doing. Maybe they will have product, but it's trading commodities. It doesn't necessarily align with my interest. So
my personal feeling on that is I don't really know what trading commodities has to have what it has to have to do with crypto at all, really,
like,
because they're just very, very different things. And also just the market for that stuff moves incredibly fast, and you're like, oh, okay, we're going to trade this stuff on a database that mints a block every minimum 2 seconds, maximum 6 seconds, let's say.
yeah,
It's like you know, in those markets in the real world,
It's kind of too slow,
people get a
isn't it?
$1 million salary to shave nanoseconds off of the execution of
Yeah.
the program that's doing the trading. And you know, there are, you know, research software development software languages, sorry, that are written purely to work in those
But
sorts of areas. So the idea that, you know, those
just
kind of
imagine
things.
the market cap is like only 5 million and market cap of commodities is 17 trillion. How many X's is that? How
Yeah, but
how how
that
big upside potential,
yeah, but
you know?
that's like saying, oh, the number of dogs in my country is like 20 million dogs, but I only have one in my house. It's like, yeah, those are just two completely unrelated data
Yeah.
points that
So
both happen to have the word dog in them.
so it was like, nah, it's not really my interest. I like Juno because it can expand. You can make the, applications on that. It makes sense. Cosmos as the hub, it makes sense. I do think of Agoric maybe, you know. I don't
I think
know
they're doing some
nothing,
interesting stuff.
but it's huge company and I've been following them like for quite a while. So like, just simple, like I want to see the product that might survive longer
Yeah,
and that is not maybe too specific, to collapse. Because
yeah.
if something is, you want to build applications like Juno doesn't, like it doesn't have this like small market share, but like you just experiment on this and build the applications. um
The
oh,
question about what is SDL, I can't
yeah.
remember what the exact acronym stands for. I think it might be Service Description Language, but it's essentially the way you define what you want to run on Akash. Um, so Akash is like a layer essentially over Kubernetes, if you know what Kubernetes is. That's not exactly correct, but hand wavingly, it's kind of correct. Um, so basically the SDL, the kind of abstraction over Kubernetes didn't allow for IP whitelisting in the way that we needed.
I actually wanted to give you shout out, because I plan to start it this way, because for those who maybe, I think people are experienced with you, but The-Frey is the largest contributor on Juno. I believe that is correct
Probably
statement.
no. I would think it would probably be notional.
Notional and you, like I think are both leading in the commits, right?
I
um
mean, leading. I think probably the most actual the most actual contribution would be notional and Jan's Alex, like Disperse. So
okay.
Disperse do less on Juno these days, but especially in the early days. So my focus is more on Rust. I'm not really a Go developer. I know how to write Go, but it's for boring reasons. It's not my favorite. Um, so I'm kind of a Go developer out of necessity because it's what the SDK is written in. Um, but especially in the early days of Juno, the majority of my focus was on Cosmwasm, tooling, documentation, test nets, that sort of stuff. And it's the Juno stuff has kind of followed. It's essentially because just there's a lot of stuff that needs doing,
Hmm.
and often there's nobody to do it, or people need help, or there's nobody around, and so uh, yeah, my contribution in particular, rather than just like broader what Needlecast do, um, yeah, like in terms of like stuff in Juno is like very much out of necessity, and that includes upstream commits and fixes and stuff that we've contributed elsewhere. Um, you know, I think if there was and I've banged on about this to the point of boring everybody, but like if there was a Rust SDK, then we would be working in that. We wouldn't be working in Go.
Yeah, I want to go back to Akash actually, because I did have questions, because like I did actually speak to my validator about Akash, like how about running node on it, and he was saying like, and it's not really, like I don't think it's possible that you can. But I see the rhetoric by Akash, like you could do essentially everything, but running the validator on Akash is quite expensive. But the other problem is like, why do you even believe in Akash? Like, from what I see, they don't really generate revenues. They burn a lot of cash. I mean, they tokens got essentially like dumped for the past year to fund the business operations. And if running the node is so expensive that it doesn't seem to be competitive to like big data centers like AWS or OVH. um and I'm afraid it might I read yesterday the article, those are often put in pair, like Helium, for example, which is like $1 billion company who makes $6,000 in revenues a month. Like, do you know numbers of Akash and where is they market feed? And they actually use. Do I understand it correctly? Because what Akash does, they just use like unused the space in those cloud computing anyway, which is essentially the same as, like, why wouldn't I use AWS but use Akash if they use their space? Like, maybe I'm confusing something. I'm really trying to understand here.
So there is a lot going on there, and
Yeah.
I suppose right. So let's. I'll try and break it down. And I've also going to change my virtual background to something from Metal Gear Solid. There we go. Let's see if that breaks. There we go.
By the way, do you know I still haven't asked any question I planned to ask you for this interview?
It's all right. And obviously, like, we dropped a ton of alpha just before this call as well. But so one of the issues I think Akash has right now is that they're a marketplace, right? And anybody who's kind of seen development of startups that are essentially marketplaces knows that supply side provision of goods in the marketplace is kind of the key to sustainable success, right? And at the moment, Akash don't have a well-developed supply side, and that's the weakness of their model. What do I mean by supply side? Like, I want a server with these specs, or server in inverted commas. Can I get it? Answer is often no. Will it be reliably up? Potentially not. So the reason to believe in Akash is because Overclock have a lot of experience with the underlying tech and the scheduler and everything. And what they were trying to do before they did Akash was essentially build this tech, but without the blockchain. And they were just like, actually, it's just easier if we're already doing escrow and all this sort of stuff to essentially just do the entire thing with a artificial currency on chain, because we already need the ledger, we already need money, we already need transactions. It's actually easier to do that stuff. So all of that makes sense. The technology is a sensible choice, and the tech team are credible. But in terms of actually developing a marketplace, they're still at a very early stage, and it's going to take a while. So it's kind of a long-term bet that they succeed. At the moment, their supply side is very underdeveloped, and to the extent that if you go and watch the video that I did where I was launching stuff, I actually failed to launch the node the first time because it couldn't find a provider that could actually provision it. And even in their documentation, the original example that is in there that will actually not work because you need to increase the cost that you're willing to pay. So to the extent that the amount you need to pay to get a reliable node on Akash at the moment, I found, just my experience, was not that dissimilar to running a small node on AWS. Which brings us back to the point of why not just run on AWS? Well, as you identified, like, there is a lot of data center capacity that is currently unused and could be sold. So there's a common thing on AWS called, like, and this is the same for all cloud providers, like reserved instances, which is where you pay for, let's say, a year of compute time. And then if you don't use, or if you realize you're not going to use some of that, you can sell it back, or you can sell it on
Right.
open marketplace. So obviously those cloud providers have a real interest in keeping that within their own walled garden. So will Akash be able to work with that market? Maybe not, but there's a lot of colo data centers there's a lot of smaller data centers that have equivalent rack space and stuff that basically could implement a scheduler on top of their unused space, and then bring that to market. And so that kind of is the bet. Is where Akash are at the moment is not where they're aspiring to be. And if they do get to where they're aspiring to be, then if you've ever essentially bought unused reserve instances on AWS Marketplace, you'll see they are actually cheaper than doing it the other way. And so these things are true. All of the individual pieces of the value proposition, that there is unused space, that it is cheaper, that it is just as reliable. All of those statements are individually correct. Are they currently linked up into a coherent product? No. Is that product impossible to build? No. Do Overclock have the technical chops to build that product? Probably.
Yeah.
Do they have the business acumen to establish and nurture that marketplace? Maybe. And to me, it's the business side, probably more than the technical side, like the development of that marketplace, that is the most likely place for it all to go wrong.
Yeah. Why not Cosmos? Why you don't want to be a validator on Cosmos?
Oh, are we doing spicy time now?
Okay. Before, before. I'm just looking at Akash validators. Interesting. The Kava Labs is number one validator. I think they actually do
Yeah, weird,
run
huh?
on. I mean, I think actually Kava do run on Akash, as I believe. But it's quite cool that they do it, because essentially they make profits as the company. And I was saying like that Juno should spin up the Validator DAO and go to other networks and move commission to community fund, but it probably is difficult to manage because Juno is not a company. So
Yeah.
but it's interesting that Kava does that, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, why
Well,
not?
you see a lot of chain foundations on other chains. I mean,
Yeah,
notoriously, Xkey, keychain, are on
yeah.
loads of other chains. And I'd be honest, I would be surprised if their validator operations on other chains weren't more profitable than their own business.
Yeah. uh, I think that just makes sense for, like, bear market. Let's survive. Let's just get the income on like many other chains, and not only Cosmos chains. Like there's many other great chains. I think, like, just from top of my head is like Mina Protocol. Like seems quite interesting product. To Not sure if you heard. Um, Not really that experience with. I mean, I know Polkadot, but it's kind of competitor to Cosmos. Everyone in Cosmos shit on Polkadot. So that could be
I,
controversial.
I hold some quite a bit of dot, not the company, but like as in I
Yeah,
personally hold
yeah.
dot. I think it's an interest. I think the interest is an interesting tech. I
That's why
don't
you
like.
you are
I
not validator on Cosmos. You prefer Polkadot,
you heard it here first. No, I don't like the parachain model in
right?
Polkadot. I think that's their biggest weakness.
Right.
But then I think there's a lot of things about Cosmos that also are problematic and don't work. So, but then the whole ecosystem is very, very early. So
And someone is asking if your background is. Oh no, like that was probably different question. But
yeah. But yeah, no, we don't.
Mina protocol is not Cosmos SDK. Akash is Cosmos SDK. I'm not sure about
Yeah,
which question it was.
but yeah,
So what?
we don't run on Cosmos. And I don't think we have any plans to. We did talk about it. We actually talked quite a bit. There are several of us that are kind of sort of in the Juno core team, I guess, that are
Yeah.
all technical, that actually talked about whether or not we should all get together and collectively run a validator on Cosmos, and we decided not to as well.
Why is it because you feel that there is maybe competition between Cosmos and Juno in certain areas, or you
Um,
don't believe in that? You think maybe, I don't know. Give me the reason.
what is the Cosmos Hub for?
as of now, it's quite purposeless. But uh, I would think it's quite purposeless. It's not really required. It has great liquidity, and Cosmos. Actually, if you want to be in Juno, you have to go through atoms. So it's actually,
There
I
you
would
go.
say, it's liquidity bridge to Cosmos ecosystem as of now.
There you go.
You know.
So that's what Cosmos is for. The amount of effort it takes to run a validator on a chain, do it well, that as a use case is not interesting enough to us as a company.
Right.
There are plenty of other people that want to validate the hub. That's cool. We don't really have an interest in fighting for like the bottom slots on a validation set. In fact, again, we talked about this on Game of Nodes in the context of having an expansion of the Juno validator set, that if you expand the validator set to let more validators in, it doesn't decentralize stake at all, really.
So that was my first question to you.
There you go.
Let's rewind. Okay, look,
Go for it. Yeah.
this is my first question I'm having to you. I'm well prepared. Here, look, this is the prop 32 on Juno.
I wondered if somebody had seen this. Yeah. Okay.
And nearly everyone vote yes. I was the second one voting, just behind the Stakefish. That's how great validator I am. Especially the reason because I'm on the bottom. I really do not want to fall out. But there's two validators voting no, which is Needlecast and Highlander, which is now rebranded to Chain Tools. I know Blockpain, I would guess maybe the others too, are not for increasing the validator set, but they're like, I'm gonna abstain because I understand some people want to participate in that. So please, what is your excuse for voting no? And I probably quite agree with you.
Well, I mean, it's as simple as this, right? Like, the decentralization of stake doesn't happen in the real world at the moment. There's no economic incentive for it to happen, or mechanism, and so it doesn't really happen. So what you actually get is validators fighting at the bottom of the set to make it profitable, which in some cases they run hardware that's unprofitable, which is fine because it doesn't slow down the network. Everything keeps working. But also, people who are running a business are going to have to economize and run lower spec hardware.
Mhm.
And that does affect block times, besides the fact that block times are just affected by a larger validator set because of the way finality works in Cosmos SDK. So the question is, I'm an engineer, right? I have a problem and it needs a solution, and I solve it. Nobody has articulated to me what the problem is that we're solving by increasing the validator set. And so I'll vote no.
Yeah.
And that's basically also why we don't run on Cosmos or a variety of other chains, is because we would be towards the bottom of the validator set. We'd be fighting with other people to stay in the set, and we'd be looking at the amount it was costing us and going, well, can we afford to provide the level of service that we want to? And the answer might be no. And so, bearing in mind that we've been in the ecosystem since last January, last February, something like that. And we'd already joined when obviously Cosmos Hub had been out for a while, though Regen had just finished its incentivized test nets. So and they had just done their KYC. So Needlecast just missed out on Regen. And that's another chain we really like. We really like the team. They do a lot for Cosmos. So, we looked at what other chains we could get involved in, and that has worked out very well for us, being picky about what other chains we work with or get involved with, and then, not being the 135th validator on those chains, but actually, contributing engineering time, contributing resources, helping out, all that sort of stuff. And so I think that's kind of where we're coming from on this. It's just like, number one, we don't really see what the problem is we're solving. And number two, if validators are just looking to get into the Juno set, depending on what their setup is, it might not actually be profitable for them, especially in a bear market.
Yeah.
And they might honestly be better off looking at other opportunities elsewhere, and those might be considerably more lucrative for them as a business.
Hmm.
And like, obviously, it's not our place to tell other people how to run their business, but I strongly suspect it's the case that
Yeah.
the amount of time and effort invested in Juno, whilst go for it, like that's cool. It's great to have the interest.
Yeah.
It's also just like it might not be the best business decision available. I think Null said on Game of Nodes that one of the most profitable chains they've ever run was Chihuahua. So you never know what chain is going to really deliver like a kind of
At
knockout.
certain point, Chihuahua was like, yeah, like, and with
Yeah,
the
I've heard
rewards,
some crazy
phew,
numbers for what people made
yeah,
on Chihuahua, and Evmos for some people has been incredibly profitable. And there are, like I said, that we're tracking, in terms of there's like, say, Kujira recently came up to mainnet, right? And then there's Quicksilver and Defund that's still in testnet.
hmm,
And there's all of these networks that are coming along. There's way more in the pipeline. There's Gitopia and stuff, which is just really cool. And
but the other problem, we have so many chains, but we don't have that many validators. And once again, we will start with one validator being on 200 chains, which is problem itself.
but
Like it's
I'm not worried about that, because the economic incentives are that if it's
yeah,
profitable and the product is good, validators will want to run on it. And
yeah,
I like, the thing is, we haven't even been in Cosmos that long, but I remember the first testnets that we were in, there were like 40 validators, 50 validators, and they
yeah,
couldn't fill a full validator set. Now you see, like, there's some of those Evermos validator sets had like 1,600 people trying to get a Gen TX in.
yeah,
Like, there is not a shortage of people that want to validate. So from a chain perspective, it's just not a problem. From a validator perspective, I think it's about like being picky about where you kind of spend your contribution, and I think that's my fundamental
yeah,
thing with that whole
yeah,
prop and that whole thing is
yeah. I want to
basically
say
that.
I'm voting yes because I have business in that. I'm on the bottom. I just like,
Yeah,
if I have 15 extra spots to fall, I will feel a little bit more secure. I don't think it decentralized the networks. Actually, you can look at the data on PingPub. Like the network actually does get more centralized over time, and that's why probably like the developer fund delegations happen to trying to prevent from that, because somehow people do prefer to give to the largest validators, like maybe for safety. I get that, and extending the validators, it doesn't help with it at all. It actually probably even centralize the network somehow more, because the bottom like just get more diluted.
yeah,
But
and
yeah,
also
I
the
don't want
bottom,
to.
the people at the bottom with the vote with a very small amount of voting power aren't going to be signing. They're going to be signing blocks, but they're not going to be proposing blocks.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
was checking, like, even for me, like I was checking, like, oh, so tiny, like, even signing blocks is just so little, and
but this is,
so
I mean, but look, this is also back to, why should you know fully how to run your own infrastructure and do all of the technical stuff? Is that if you are not reliant on other people to set an agenda for how your business runs in terms of validator operation, you can go and experiment with other test nets. You can go and
yeah.
do all these sorts of things. Like, we participated in a couple of T-grade test nets, but they had already filled their validator set, so we went, okay, well, we're going to move on. And T-grade's a great product, incidentally.
Hmm.
But if you have the freedom to basically just spin up a node and then join a test net, see whether you think they have product or not, and all that kind of stuff, it does open you up to being able to be less tied to one network. Obviously, as a company, we're very, very tied to Juno, because not only emotionally, we've been involved in it a long time, we've been involved with it so long that we care about
Hmm.
it as a network, we care about it as something we've literally invested blood, sweat, and tears in. But it's also, we also need to take a step back,
Hmm.
and say, like, what is the future of our company? And it's not just one network either. So yeah, I don't know. but that's I don't know. I'm probably being boring now, so I think that's probably
No,
enough on
it's very
validator
cool.
sets.
It's very cool. And also, look, people clap hands for you. And because so many validators do depend on those the not this funds, like getting funds from the core development fund, which is understandable because you do develop on Juno. But if you do expand the set, you might need to share it with more. And isn't it like the concern, like small, like I mean, like if someone will redelegate something from you because we have to actually redelegate to more people, like that's also kind of like if you can condensate
Yeah,
network.
I guess so. That we see when we see redelegations, we keep an eye on them, but they're almost always going to validators above us in the set, not below us in the
Yeah,
set. And I think
yeah.
that really says it all. A lot of we have quite a lot of moderate sized delegators, I guess.
Mhm.
We've done a little bit of analysis, and I think one of the things that we do, I think it's almost by accident, is I get a lot of shit on Game of Nodes, and occasionally on Twitter and Discord from other validators and stuff, like mainly obviously joking, stuff about the fact that we run a quite expensive operation, in that my background is very much cloud infrastructure.
And
Like I used to run bare metal back in the day, but now
ten
I
percent commission
yeah,
as
we
well.
get shit about that as well. But we run everything on AWS, and we pay the price for that. It's very expensive to do so. But what that seems to have done over time is, especially us talking about it, is we've noticed that we've got more mid-sized delegations. So I think what's also happened is kind of almost accidental marketing, where people have said, "Oh, we're doing it wrong by spending too much money on that hardware rather than using." Because obviously bare metal hardware, if you have redundancy, it doesn't really matter. Like it's all just six of one, half a dozen of the other. But I think there's also a class of people that have just gone, hey, whatever, I have 1,000 Juno that I want to just tuck away somewhere. And they've, tucked it away with Needlecast because maybe they're an engineer, maybe they're technical, maybe they are non-technical, but understand the implications of
Yeah.
what we're paying for. And they've just gone, okay, well, probably that might be more reliable.
How
But
much you pay
our bill per rig, it's thousands of dollars per month
on AWS for your
per
node?
network. Yeah,
Whoa, so much. Why is that? Like we do like $80, I think, on hour, and it's like I think it's good enough, right? Like
yeah. But we have a
good.
setup that, so bear in mind, my background is like corporate
Yeah.
contracting, government
Is it
work,
is
that
it
sort of
better
stuff.
than you would run the bare metal at home? I want to know.
Uh, so I could build out a bare metal rig that was just as reliable as what we're running on a cloud provider, but it would result in a lot more um, time spent messing around with it constantly.
Yeah.
So if we were contracting for a big company or doing government work again, we would just go, okay, what's the way we can meet this contract? If the client, because the client
Yeah.
tends to foot the bill, right, for your infrastructure when you do that kind of work. So when you bill them, they say, okay, we want it to be up for 3 nines typically. So like 3 nines would be 99.9% of the time. And then you as an infrastructure provider go, okay, well, how can we do that? You work out a way, and then you invoice that money back to the client. If I was doing that for a government project or something, I would use AWS. I would blah 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 blah, do all these things, and it wouldn't be cheap. And that's basically what we do
Yeah.
for our validator rigs, is we just spend the money, and
Yeah.
it results in us making a lot less profit as a company. But
Yeah.
it's just that's just our habit, I suppose, from our background or whatever. And there's a
I
lot
I
there's
just
a way of doing that a lot cheaper, but equally, other than maintenance windows, which we actually have talked about maintenance windows and stuff a lot on Game of Nodes. Like we're not too worried about downtime, having an hour of downtime here and there.
Yeah.
because the penalty is so small in terms of like missed blocks or missed income, but in terms of like actual reliability of the underlying systems,
Yeah.
uh, that's our bet anyway, is that those
Hmm.
things have been good enough for government work in the
You
past, and so we're replicating the same stuff. And
you
that's not
should
to say
talk
it won't
more.
go down tomorrow,
Yeah, you
but
should talk
hopefully
more
not.
about this. I think this is actually quite interesting. Like because everyone is like, oh, bare metal at home, AWS banned, but like they don't realize that you are so fucking reliable here. Like, but I want to address like the Ted Crypto like says that doesn't have to be a problem to increase validator set, but be like, and I think maybe that could relate to Calum, right? Like it's very expensive for Calum to be in active set, but expanding this, like it could give the opportunity to Calum to jump on active set because he develops on this network. But I also want to say it in contradiction, Calum is so liked that he if he would say tomorrow, I do have a node, he's going very high. Just that's the reality.
But then the irony of that is, and this is actually something that's true within the Howl team, is that because a big chunk of my time is spent, well, obviously Juno is actually the biggest thing that takes up time, not validation. Probably the validation, we have it quite locked down
Hmm.
in terms of like time considerations and stuff. Like it's probably a day or two a week, most weeks at most. But like Juno does take up a lot of time. But that said, there are times when we don't have as much time to work on Howl or something because we are a validator. And I think there's a lot of, oh yeah, devs should just be validators, like just be validators. Like it takes
Yeah.
no time and no effort and no money. Like none of those things are true. And the idea that everybody should be a validator is okay. So there's two things. Should everybody be able to be a validator? I personally think yes, potentially. Is that what the Cosmos SDK is designed to do? No, the Cosmos SDK is designed to have 100, 200 validators max, who are,
Can't you go with 1,000 at some point?
you potentially can, but it is going to fall over, and especially because something like Juno is a Cosmosm chain that has additional performance implications.
Right.
Like this isn't Bitcoin, it's not BitTorrent, it's a peer-to-peer network with fast finality that relies on a particular consensus implementation.
Hmm.
Um, and I think people misunderstand that. I think it would be cool. So, in terms of system stability, it would be obviously just like logically superior to have a highly heterogeneous validator set running on all sorts of infrastructure, all sorts of node types, blah, 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 blah. But a lot, if you go look at BlockPane's block monitor, you see a lot of it is in two Hetzner data centers,
Yeah.
um, in Europe, and all those
Hmm.
packets are just bouncing between those. So it's, I think basically, I think a lot of this discussion, I'll be blunt, is theatre, and I think a
Hmm.
lot of it is virtue signaling. And
Yeah.
validators are all businesses, and they're all in it to make money. And there's no
Yeah.
real, um, it's none of it's altruistic. So I think a lot of the arguments are being had in terms of these things that actually just don't apply, because it's all
Hmm.
about running a business and people justifying different things for what is best for their business.
Yeah.
Um, I obviously, what's best for our business, Needlecast, is what's best for Juno. So my interest is aligned entirely with, does this make Juno better for Juno
Yeah.
users? And so that's why I come back to if I don't see a thing, I'm like, why are we doing this? Because it's just going to make life more complicated. Um, are those all problems that should be addressed in the future in proof of stake networks or whatever tech comes along next? And it will be some other tech. Yes, I think so.
Mm. The sport is saying there's significant time and investment to run in a validator too. I need to
Yeah,
tell you, Sporty, it's I don't see it. I'm not honestly. I'm 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 having pretty a lot of spare time.
we need to get
So,
Sporty on Game of Nodes actually as well. Let's
oh,
make it happen.
I don't know who's. I actually even don't know who's for. You see, many people I don't know. Is the validator
Um, wrote
protocol
a
engineer in Cosmos?
wrote a Cosmwasm extension
Right,
for VS Code IDE. I think it was called Cosmi Wasmi, Wasmi Cosmi. Like it was had a good
right.
name. It was
I
funny.
heard of this. I see right now. Like I saw those. I saw those tweets. Um, I am. I am manager of all of the validators. That's the truth about Don Kryptonium.
You're basically like Bono, and somebody else is like
It's a very
the
important
Edge
role.
or something.
It's a very important role, right? Uh, I'm a string to your guitar, you know. Um, so how social? Yeah, you just said about the blocks, right? The block time, and and I don't know. Can you actually do the social network on the blockchain? When every single thing you do is separate transaction. So I give the heart under your tweet, and it has to go through the transaction, which is essentially disincentivizing me from liking the posts. I don't know.
Well,
Like I don't even know if
I
this
don't know.
the
Are
likes
you
will
are
be
you old
blockchain
enough?
signed.
Are you old enough to remember 56K modems or 20 or whatever they were, 32 K before that? Like the internet used to be slow, man. Like I
I
remember
got
that.
internet in quite late. It was I think 2000 or 2001.
Okay, so I remember like the internet in like late 90s and
Right.
6 seconds to load a page, that would have been great a
Sorry,
lot of
I
the
think
time.
longer. I think I got computer in 99. I know. Like I'm from like working class family in Poland, so like don't be surprised. But
Yeah.
um yeah. So yeah. But like why we go back in time with like with the social network, right? It's
Well,
I'm just asking question like because it's very difficult to make the social platform on blockchain, and there was like multiple attempts, and this was just like really difficult to do. and um
well, I guess
and
the question
I
is what's different about blockchain versus just doing it on Web 2?
yeah, tell me about like why you do it and what are the advantages, and I want to also
Well,
know
what's
what's
the
the
what so
disadvantages.
my question to you is what is the monetization model for a social network on Web 2?
Advertisement.
Right. And has
And
that worked out very well for us?
for users it doesn't, because you are the product that they sell, right? So you actually can't make money, but they make money off you. So yeah, you are.
So I think it's on the record pretty heavily that obviously my background is I did economics and history as at university, and
Mhm.
I guess I'm very interested in economic systems, the history of economics in general, and in particular, like I read No Logo by Naomi Klein when I was a lot younger, and was just like, yeah, this is exactly it. Advertising is cancer. It's one of the worst things it's bad for mental health. It's bad for democracy.
Mhm.
It's bad for the internet and the incentivization to build interesting things. It's literally, I don't think there's a single axis around which advertising is really a good thing, other than if you are a big corporation looking to
I
infringe
want
on
to.
people's privacy.
Okay, I
And
want to. Okay, go on. Sorry, I
uh,
shouldn't stop you.
and it's also a significant vector, I suppose, in the internet world of centralization of like as in the accumulation of power into platforms that have
Mhm.
already got a working advertising model, and they can then buy up new contenders in the space or interesting projects full stop, and just use those as another vector to collect data. And so that's obviously like essentially like the beginning of this is Naomi Klein's thesis, which is no logo, advertising bad, branding bad. Everybody is now conceiving of that, even just down to everything in that book, which was obviously written a very long time ago. now has come true. Like the idea that people would not talk about companies, they would talk about brands. They wouldn't talk about products, they would talk about brands. They wouldn't talk about their own personal like career, they would talk about their personal brand. All that stuff has come true for a whole generation since Naomi Klein wrote the book, and it has become completely normalized that these things are okay. And it's like, no, they're kind of not. They're actually very, very corrosive to the heart of our social culture and our social contract. And then you look on top of that at what, you know, social, what kind of economic theory and stuff has come since. And there's one of the best books on the subject is Capitalism is Dead by Mackenzie Walk, which I'm a big fan of, and I recommend to people too much.
Can you repeat again?
Capitalism is Dead, Is There Something Worse is the subtitle, by Mackenzie Walk. And it, essentially the thesis of that is that the battle between, I suppose, the liberalization of markets versus organized labor that was happening in the 60s and 70s resulted in organized labor kind of fighting, I suppose you might say, like large corporations or that kind of impulse to a standstill at the end of the 1970s, which led to a especially in the West, obviously, it's very kind of sort of global North centric, if you like, led to a kind of wave of sort of outsourcing and things like that to get around organized labor unions and that sort of thing. In the UK, it led to a government like using essentially just like strike breaking tactics to destroy organized labor and sort of crush the working class. In sort of other countries, you had things like shock doctrine, you know, in various like Latin American countries driven by the Americans, which was basically about kind of, yeah, essentially breaking economies so that they could then reshape them in their own image. And all of that stuff, you know, completely fucking sucked. And what was that all to do? Well, it was all basically so that these big corporations didn't have to pay their staff in the global North a higher wage because they were part of a union. And then lots and lots of other stuff happened. But what those sort of like first wave capitalists did was, in order to make all that stuff work, that outsourcing and all of the other things they were doing, where they were pushing off production to other parts of the world, was they had to improve their communications technology. And so a bunch of people, a bunch of nerds and computer programmers and companies like Microsoft built the technology to do that. And then something interesting happened in the 1990s, which was that those people went, well, hang on a second, what do we actually need these large scale, you know, manufacturing companies for anymore? We've done all of the linking together of stuff, and you can just do this stuff anywhere now. And then there's a second wave of consolidation where essentially the companies that become the biggest companies in the world, you know, the obvious ones like, you know, Google, to an extent even things like Facebook, I suppose, but, you know, Google, Amazon, and then second wave stuff like Airbnb, blah, blah, like anything where you see a marketplace, essentially. Usually now it's basically connecting together two actors in a place, who cares where, in a place, who cares where, and they're basically trading information, right? And that the argument of capital is dead is that this actually represents a wholly new version of the commodity form of capitalism, and we're actually no longer in capitalism, because that final change, where essentially the people who were brought in to outsource on behalf of the capitalists have actually now become the biggest companies in the world, and they're now more powerful than the capitalist class, and they have a wholly different agenda. Does this really exactly affect social networks? No, but it's part of the whole kind of general crisis of sort of social democracy we've certainly had in the global North in the last few years. And I don't know, it's all very interesting, it's all very related. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use Twitter, I don't know. But what I do know is that the interesting thing about blockchain is that you can build economic systems from scratch. And even in the most noddy version of that, you can build systems that don't rely on advertising, that actually pay people, and you can decide how those work. And so that is the reason for trying to build this stuff on a blockchain. And as I said, in that kind of context, the thing that most users care about is looking stuff up, which is relatively quick. And obviously you can do performance optimizations on top of. If Howl is successful, we have loads of ways of optimizing performance on the read side. That's very trivial. On the write side, obviously you're tied to 6-second blocks at the moment, but that also can be improved. You can speed up block times if you need to.
Well, there's more. Like, have you heard of Roblox? Essentially, cocaine for children.
I have seen numerous funny videos on YouTube about it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think the Roblox is like that's the new new social media actually, like, and really metaverse, like wherever kids is like completely absorbed into this. Um,
Yeah.
but what I wanted to like, okay, but we have this other, so like I understand you giving the power in the like hands of the people. Let's say it this way, simplified way. Um, but it also like about what actually does attract and create this dopamine rush on the platform, right? So like I understand you might like giving the power to the people, but if they don't get the dopamine rush, they not necessarily might stick. And there is like Sporty said Trump could never be cancelled from Howl social, right? And Trump
Not
has
true.
now and he has now new platform. I don't even know what's the title. No one is going there. Like, I mean, only people who like Trump go there because it's not interesting. Everyone anyway stayed on the Twitter. Even the Trump supporters, they stayed on the Twitter.
Yeah,
So
that's because it's because of network effects, isn't it?
yeah.
So I mean, like, it's worth saying.
So how
Obviously,
you
this is
bring the people? Like,
well,
I
it's basically an experiment. Like the whole thing is kind of a
yeah.
why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after launch, we're going to bridge it to Twitter. We can't do that before launch because of the way the
Yeah, that
Twitter
would be
API
nice.
works. But you'll be able to basically post from Howl, and it will land on Twitter as well. Um,
Yeah.
for just from our point of view, Needlecast and stuff will stop using Twitter and just use Howl.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's less about the people owning the platform, and it's
Yeah.
more about changing the economic incentives behind how the platform pays for itself. That's really the kind of the impetus, I guess, behind all of the kind of slightly incoherent rambling theory that I threw at you a few minutes ago. That's not
Yeah.
really relevant. The theory is not really relevant to the can you build a social network that doesn't rely on advertising?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is yes, we think,
Yeah.
and that's what Howl is.
I wanted to ask you because like how you monetize how social, like I mean, I understand the users can monetize because you can reward them or whatever, but is there like any incentive for the platform to be monetized, maybe for
Yeah, so
core
you know how
teams, maybe the
well,
token can play the role there.
yeah, so you know how a chain has a community tax
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah,
on
yeah,
depending
Cosmos
depending on
has like 10%
yeah,
or
it's between
some.
5 and 25% typically goes
Mm-hmm.
into either a multi-sig or
Yeah.
a DAO that is then distributed out to fund development or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Howl has that basically. So a proportion of funds go into the DAO treasury, which is managed by all users of Howl, and a tax is also sent to a separate developer treasury, which manages development of Howl. So
And the
Howl can
tax, sorry, the tax is on all the tokens that will be sent there, or like,
It's
so if
on
I send
all
Juno to
it's on
someone,
all no, it's not on Juno. It's on all Howl tokens that are issued as rewards.
so you can reward people like with Howl token. You cannot connect the other coins to reward them
Yeah,
with.
so everything in Howl is just Howl tokens.
So actually, to you to send the money, like let's say, let's call it money to the users, you have to use the Howl token. So you have to
Yeah.
exchange to Howl, so
Everything in
that
Howl is just
incentivizes.
a walled garden
Right.
of
So
Howl
so you
tokens.
actually build an economy around the token.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool because that's missing in many DAO tokens.
Yeah.
You know.
So the whole
So.
point is it's not just like a DAO with some shitty token that isn't useful.
Hmm.
If you if you want to like a post on Howl, you need Howl tokens. If you want
Yeah.
to interact with so example, there's a thing we call Howl Pay, which is going to get more complex as time goes on, but you can think of it like Patreon,
Yeah.
where you can do recurring payments to creators that might not
Hmm.
even be on Howl, that is in they might not be posting, you know, blog content, but you might just want to support them. You can
Yeah.
do that via essentially like a Patreon type mechanism.
Hmm.
and then those users will obviously on a monthly basis be cashing that out because they'll want that in fiat, right? So a lot of the problem you have, in I guess like especially like CW20s and like DAOs is that there's all of the flow of tokens is out or whatever, whereas we have essentially a mechanism which is that in order to reward creators and actually interact properly with the platform, i.e., liking stuff and blah 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 blah, you need Howl tokens. And in order to get paid, creators are going to need to cash out their Howl tokens. So we have like liquidity in both directions that is strongly incentivized to go in both directions.
Yeah.
And that's something that like we might not
So
have. We
how
might
is
not
money?
have it for legal reasons. Let's say it's a non-traded exchange,
I like to use,
non-exchange
I
token.
like to use this term because for me, money is economy. How, like, so, I mean, like,
For legal reasons, I will say it's definitely not money.
yeah,
It's definitely
right.
whatever the it's definitely just an exchange traded token that is incredibly volatile, and it's
Right.
definitely not money. It's not money. It's not e-money. For regulatory reasons, it is not any of those things.
Yeah, I wonder like how you go with transactions, like because like transactions has to be paid in Juno, it's on the Juno network.
Yeah. So at the moment, it's all we could actually make it all in Howl. For the moment, we're doing it in Juno because it makes more sense because the host chain people have Juno already. It's just kind of more complex. So there's actually a lot of things, and also like this ideas that carried over from the name service maybe, which are actually kind of more like wallet ideas, like being
Yeah.
able to fill up a wallet with tokens and then not have to sign every post or have a little pool of money that you can spend down, all that sort of stuff. Like Howl Pay. Howl Pay is a sort of the beginning of a mini wallet. Basically, at the moment, it's just this tiny little screen in Howl. So AS Weaver, who did a huge amount of the heavy lifting on the Howl development, has been a big fan of that kind of stuff and has built some proof of concepts around other things that can do those kind of already signed transactions. It's all very, very cool, interesting thinking. And that's probably where Howl Pay, if Howl is successful, that's probably where Howl Pay will go, is some kind of extended, if not wallet functionality, then something maybe that other people can use as a hook into their own wallets to provide additional functionality for their users. And I guess on the Juno question, like it's unclear to us whether we would do fees in Howl or whether we would long term solve that by moving to our own blockchain, which I think the underlying the kind of reasoning behind Juno is that you can find product market fit on Juno, and then when you scale beyond Juno, you can just build your own app
Yeah.
chain. And
Yeah.
I think probably longer term, our feeling is that if there is significant interest in this, we will build an app chain
Yeah.
and we will gradually migrate over to that.
So you actually like you starting as the app on Juno, but you're going to be your own chain
If it's successful. I mean, obviously, if everybody just says it's dog shit, then we
with
won't
its
do
set
that.
of validators.
Yes.
With
I
Don being
mean,
number one validator on there, like of course,
I mean,
33%
of
of voting
course.
power.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, whether or not that's even Cosmos SDK, I don't know. I would suspect that I think our minimum criteria are that it would be Cosmwasm and have IBC. But other than that, I don't think. I mean, there's a lot of things I think about the way that voting and stuff currently work on Cosmos that would not be desirable for a Howl chain.
Yeah.
That I think we would actively look to rebuild. We're not in any hurry, so I think we would look to rebuild a lot of different things in such a way that it made the most economic sense in terms of the incentives and systems we could build around it for the chain
Right.
itself.
So they were asking about Soy was asking about Desmos, which was another attempt to create social network, which was failed quite. I don't know if you how you could build on Desmos actually. Don't know if
Yeah,
you
I mean
looked into this.
they don't have Cosmosm, so you can't deploy stuff on their network. But yeah, I mean we already have more functionality than Desmos in Howl by quite a big margin. So like that is I guess that's kind of trash talk, but it's also like factually correct. So
hmm Um, like, but that's valid question from Karel. Like, Twitter doesn't really discriminate poverty, but you at How Social seem to be discriminating poverty. Um, how will you enable using Howl to people who um, cannot use tokens because they don't have them?
Long term, long term, you need to basically build this out on its own chain, because there's no way you can do that without quite complicated economic mechanics that cannot be done at this stage in a decentralized application that's just smart contracts, or maybe could be, but would be so beyond. Yeah.
So
So the point is, those people don't really exist at the moment in the blockchain space, so we're not
mhm,
worried about it. It's not a problem we
right,
have. The problem that we're trying to solve right now, the problem that is kind of immediately facing us, is admittedly largely confined to the global north. It is entirely confined to crypto early adopters. Um,
hmm
and it is essentially the one of, when stuff is completely free, you are the product, and that has a
yeah,
number of undesirable knock-on effects.
hmm
And what we are trying to do is experiment with new economic systems, and we're not going to have them right at all
yeah,
the first time when we do this. Um, but if there is an interest in this as a project, and if we have any traction, we're going to build that and move it forward. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I think that
you
this is
have
going to
such a
take
great answers.
this is going to take 5 to 10 years for anything like seriously mainstream to come in the
hmm
space. Like, whoever works this out is going to be
hmm
working on this for the next 5 to 10 years,
yeah,
and it's not clear what those incentives and mechanisms will be. But now is the first time, I think, in Cosmos is the ecosystem where we sort of have all the building blocks we need to actually start building even very simple systems to sort of see
hmm
how they play out in the real world. And that's
yeah,
basically what Howl is. And we obviously would love it to be a great success and everybody say it's genius and we're really clever people and lovely and um, just big brain giga chats or whatever. But no, in all likelihood, we're going to have some uptake, some use. People are going to enjoy it. Some people will make some money off it. We'll hopefully support some creators, and that'd be cool. But it will still be
hmm
crypto early adopters using it. And at the moment, we're kind of fine with that. We've sort of said we've got a number of scenarios that we're like, if this happens, we'll do this. If this happens, we'll do this.
yeah,
And as long as it kind of makes enough money to pay for its time, we're going to continue developing it and moving it forward. Like I say, we kind of have a roadmap. We kind of have notions of
yeah,
what all the next features in the next 6 months or whatever will be,
hmm
and eventually that leads to its own app chain and a bunch of other stuff, I guess.
that's really good point, because even if somehow you're able to go to million users in crypto world, that is like huge. That like already creates like vibrant ecosystem. If you We don't have even that number of wallets, but I was thinking how you can invite maybe people from outside of the Juno ecosystem. Have you considered allocating the funds for the kind of maybe, some in Web2 referral programs are quite popular. I wonder if there is like how referral program to onboard new users. I know it's like maybe silly idea for some, but maybe valid if you
Well,
planned
that
it.
this is the thing. If you can write a smart contract to do it and it can interact with Howl, then it can be deployed and it will work, because it's a composable smart contract system and we have a bunch of endpoints. And the Howl DAO has 10% of all inflation. So if somebody wanted to
Mhm.
say, we want to give some percentage of inflation to incentivizing and onboarding new users, then you can do that. So
But you will have like DAO treasury, right?
yeah,
So you can use this like you can do like DAO voting and like allocate the certain amount of DAO treasury into referral program, no?
yeah. So
And
you probably do it like you build a smart contract that
right,
acted, I guess, similarly to a faucet, but had some additional proof needed for
yeah. So
recovery
someone would
funds.
have to actually develop it and enable such a referral program there. right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like conceptually it would be similar to a Merkle drop
Mhm.
claim contract, but with some additional steps.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you'd fund it with the DAO treasury, and then kind of go
yeah.
from there. But
You,
yeah, I
you,
mean, this is all again kind of doable. I think like where our initial focus is to get to, I don't know, we'll get to, so the name service, for an example, has about 10,000 unique users. Our goal with Howl initially is to get to 1,000 users. If we get to 1,000 users, that's our first milestone.
1,000 daily users, active daily
Just
users,
1,000 active users, like not even
just
on a daily
1,000
basis.
active users,
Um,
right?
and we will have to basically do some transaction. We'll basically,
Mhm.
we're going to, when we get to that point, we'll start doing some proper indexing on transactions. The main thing we're going to do actually is run indexes to work out who's actually using the service, because we don't want to run like make a Web3 service and then just like run Google Analytics on top of it, because that's kind of like bullshit. So we're instead going to kind of try and get our metrics kind of on chain from the things that obviously people publicly are prepared to post. And then additionally, there is actually the other thing, which is that longer term, we also want to build a lot of
Mhm.
privacy primitives into it. And that's one of the things that we, again, have to ultimately long term look at as a thing that couldn't exist necessarily on Juno.
Mhm. You know, I'm on Howl social right now, but I'm trying to go to Airdrop, and this site can't be reached. I wanted to actually disclose the maybe some Airdrop amount or um.
Yeah, the airdrop tab won't work until mainnet, because it goes somewhere that doesn't exist yet.
So like how do I check, because the airdrop on the testnet would be the same as airdrop on the mainnet? How can I check it? Like sorry,
You can
like
test it by going to the testnet Juno tools.
um oh, test Juno tools, and sorry for that. Like I'm just trying to do it um live too. And what should I search the airdrop or
Uh, so Callum's saying
okay,
in the
that's
chat,
okay. That's
we
okay.
crashed Juno
I
tools. So in the
I
time in
expect
the
to
time that
be
we've been talking, apparently what's happened is we've crashed Juno tools.
yeah.
So
Um
Callum, I haven't been on Twitter or anything during this conversation. Can you give us an update? What's what is happening? Quickly type a
someone
comment.
doesn't appreciate me. Is this guy gonna ask question and have a conversation on, like, we do have conversation? I'm not sure. What do you mean retro? But how was the airdrop calculated, if you can?
Um,
If you can
so
share that.
the
Per
main
name, per wallet. Yeah, go on.
So there are a few moving targets, but we also average them out down to a certain amount for calculation's sake.
Mm-hmm.
The main goal was basically to make sure that a significant number of Juno stakers had enough Howl to onboard with and then have a play around with.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that inflation works in Howl is that the initial amount doesn't matter so much, because over time it gets averaged out.
Mm-hmm.
So the main thing you kind of want to do is go on the service, become active, stake, and then staking expires. And then
Mm-hmm.
because of inflation, so let's say I go on, I just stake my airdrop and then I never go back again, that will become worthless, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's what happens with you when you have dilution of supply, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also the fact is that it will also unstake after 14 epochs, so
Mm-hmm.
it won't even be staked. So if it's staked, obviously will keep up with inflation, but if it becomes unstaked, then it will go away. So there's a kind of built-in mechanic where users are going to have to check back in, even if they just try and restake
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
same
yeah.
thing every time. So that's one of the things that we were kind of keen, especially at this kind of testnet stage, to like see how people reacted to it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the design of the airdrop was basically around making sure that at least we kind of had this thing in our head. We wanted over 50,000 Juno stakers to have access to Howl tokens, like enough to have a meaningful interaction with it. So we were basically adjusting the amounts to make sure that that happened. But then equally, our most active users are going to be people who have names. So we kind of also wanted to make sure that those people had basically a like kind of a multiple of what a normal Juno staker would get,
Yeah.
so that they felt like they weren't getting shortchanged.
And how was it calculated? Like one name, does two name give you more?
It's
How?
all it's all uniques per address. So we put together all of the things and then basically added up the sum of the various qualifying criteria.
So
But
does the more
additional
names give you more, or
additional names was not, and it was not one of the criteria. No, there were. I'm not going to disclose what every criteria was, but there were
yeah, fucking hell,
additional names.
should make 100 wallets. Fucking
Yeah, if you
screaming.
if Don Kryptonian made 100 wallets, it would have got more. But the thing is, the
All
flip
that.
side.
Do you know how much I donated to Needlecast?
But the flip side of
Do you?
this, the flip
I
side of
think
this, right?
300 Juno
But the flip side of this, right, is that
at the all-time high. No, before that, I started like
this is not financial. This has never been financial advice. But the point is that, like, if you the value of the names is not going to be the airdrop. The value of the names would be the fact that they are actually usernames for a networking service. And also bear in mind that there are other, from the point of view just airdrops, we obviously know about from the name service that there are other projects in Cosmos that are going to airdrop to name holders, because the name service on Juno is, I think, the largest by user base decentralized application other than JunoSwap, obviously. So it has like a large number of users. People are aware of that. They airdrop to them. They're going to airdrop to them as an active user base. Our goal was like, look, okay, how are we providing utility to the people who have bought a name to use it as a single user? That is our kind of core group of people, because of how the Howl token is also the DAO token. We were in the position, especially with the airdrop, that if we gave a lot of Howl to people that essentially had gamed for the purposes of the airdrop, we would be giving over control of the DAO treasury to people that were airdrop hunters, and then they could just rug the whole project. So there's also that kind of concern, which I think people don't really think about enough, I think, as a kind of actual democratic problem. That you might actually get your project rugged by essentially airdrop hunters. which I mean, if that happened to us, I guess we'd just be like, oh well, we should have thought more carefully about that. I guess we'd just like brush ourselves off and go and work on something else for a while. But like, it has been we're talking about like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of work here. So
I was planning to make the first proposal, rename the house social to Don Don, and and
would we follow the will of the people? I don't know. There are still some
vote with 100 wallets, and
there are still some Don social, yeah.
Non-social,
there are still some things that are going to come along. Obviously, this is just like the testnet is just an alpha version. We're still working on a bunch of things behind the scenes. There are some bugs that we know about that people might run into in the next couple of days, which we're actually fixing behind the scenes as well. But there's also some kind of cool stuff that's going to come from mainnet that's completely unrelated to what we're there's some cool stuff that's coming on mainnet that you won't see on the testnet version, and I think people are hopefully going to think is pretty cool. But we're not going to reveal any of that yet. So this is like we're keeping some cool stuff back for when we actually do the mainnet launch.
Before we started, like on YouTube, someone was commenting that like, hey, the logo should be improved, and this person I think is tattoo artist, and they said this is like pretty basic, cheap logo that should be improved. I'm actually going to find it's not my words, okay? So like I don't want to be the person being offensive or like hurting the feeling, but it was
That's
actually
really that's really hurt my feelings, man.
um I, I cannot roll back that much far. It was before we started. I think it was actually Carol uh saying
Yeah.
this.
So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
here is
not.
the story, here is the yeah.
Yeah. I'm I'm not going to comment on that further. But yeah,
So and I was saying to you, can I actually share a little bit of, can I share like the layer, the how social or not? It's still
it's live now. So the
right.
alpha's
So
live. Go ahead.
my feeling was like right, like I don't even know how to post. Um
Are we doing a design crit?
yeah, and I felt right, like if you go to Twitter, like it's pretty open space, like it
Oh, you mean
feels
like
wide.
the width?
Yeah, it's like it doesn't have this heavy framing as well. Maybe it's because I
Bear
got
in
used to
mind,
Twitter.
well, I was also going to say, Don, that do you remember Twitter like back in the early days?
I joined Twitter very late. I joined Twitter when I like started doing the crypto YouTube. So like year
Okay, so
ago,
like
I remember, but I like there was this like typing frame and like so yeah, it was very basic.
yeah, so
Um.
I think I would say on the design side of things, like that
Mhm,
none, although Weaver is probably the closest to actually a designer, compared
mhm,
to me or Callum, who um, aren't so good at that side of things.
mhm.
We're also very early on in the project, and this is what you would call a minimum viable product. It's about
Yeah.
showcasing some functionality and seeing how people react to it.
So
And we have, you know, if people think that this is an interesting thing they want to see more development of, then say so, because that is going to be the incentive we need to continue building. We're going to launch obviously on mainnet regardless and see how it goes. And we're going to obviously take on board feedback and stuff that comes through in the alpha, and we're going to improve on it.
mhm,
But this is the beginning of what could be a 5 or 10 year process of us refining this product. So you know, there is a lot of stuff that is going to change,
mhm.
and if we have enough money to hire a designer uh, after mainnet
I,
launch, then loads of stuff will obviously change, just because none of us are designers really, and all that kind of stuff too.
yeah.
Um, though, like I say, there is also a bunch of stuff that we're not revealing yet about the mainnet launch, which I think will make people who
Mhm.
might be making comments about certain,
That's why
they
I
might
didn't really.
they might be pleasantly surprised. Let's put it that way.
I didn't want to like go this route because I know there is not even many people working. Like how many people work on how social, right?
Three,
Yeah. So like achieving what you achieve with three people, I would.
and none of us are full time on it either.
Yeah. I would guess.
Weaver still has a day job. Callum's obviously a big contributor to
Right.
DAO, and also obviously we
Hmm.
do Cosmizing by Dummies, which is educational series. We both do a lot of stuff with helping developers on board the ecosystem. Callum obviously wrote Cosmism Zero to Hero, which is one of the but it's probably the best guide for getting up to speed with Cosmism that exists right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting included in the main Cosmism documentation as a result. And then obviously, I work on Juno, do validation stuff, and obviously there are some other people involved in Needlecast, but a lot of it is on my shoulders. So none of us work on it full time. This has been something that we've been working on. I think the first commit I did on this was back in last November, but I
Yeah.
think Weaver and Callum joined in February, and that's when we really started working on it. We got a little bit derailed by Prop 16, but this is, I guess, like part
Hmm.
time, 4 or 5 months worth of work. It's probably thousands of hours of work, and I think
Yeah.
in terms of like the size of the smart contracts on in this project and on Juno, it's probably one of the largest I mean, maybe DAO might be bigger. Juno Swap might have more lines of smart contract code.
Yeah.
I don't really know, but this is one of the most ambitious smart contract applications that's been built in the cosmos. So, just even that in its own regard, I think once we're live and we start open sourcing, progressively open sourcing all of the stuff, Callum and I have a big plan to do some. We've been kind of teasing on Cosmos and by Dummies that we were going to do some more learning materials and stuff later in the summer. We have this idea about we're going to start we're going to go through a bunch of stuff that we've done in the contracts and use it as teaching materials as well. Like to be like, look, if you need to do this quite complicated thing, here's how you can achieve it. There might be a better way, but this is how we solved it. And kind of, also use that as a means to kind of give something back to the community as well, especially developer community, to say, look, we built a thing, whether or not you think it's a useful thing doesn't change the fact that it's quite a large, hairy, complicated set of smart contracts that have a lot of functionality. And maybe you want to build something ambitious too. And maybe you can study this code and then use that as inspiration or whatever. So yeah, I
was wondering, you are in Rust, right? Like you said, you mainly Rust guy.
Yeah.
Have you looked in Nomic? It's been written from the scratch. It didn't use the Cosmos SDK, but it's got written in Rust from the start. Like just wonder if you looked into this. What is it like?
Yeah, it's there. I've read a bit of their source code and I kind of looked at how it works. This is why they have the whole IBC thing right at the moment.
Yeah, like
so you can't communicate via IBC. It's because Nomic existed before IBCRS, and so they need to do quite a bit of work to actually get set up. Whereas Penumbra, which is also written in Rust, is using IBCRS, and so they should be basically. I think they posted on Twitter the other day, didn't they, Penumbra, that they are the first IBC enabled zone not written using the Cosmos SDK, which is really pretty exciting.
Are they already IBC enabled?
Yes, they're on testnet.
Okay, but if Nomic comes in mainnet, Nomic can still make it like so. We'll see.
Well, I think technically they will be beaten because Ethan Fry was telling me something the other day, which I have to remind myself of. But I think there is another network that has already. Yeah, so there's a. Oh no, that's Cosmos. I'm sorry, that's not. I thought it was a substrate network running IBCRS, but no, I just checked my messages with Ethan Fry. It's Cosmos and VM. So, but yeah, there are going to be other networks. Who knows which one it will be first on mainnet.
Max, I don't think you can get in trouble. There is no way to actually stop you unless via like voting, which would be like silly to vote on everything.
Not true. No? There's moderation.
Oh, so there will be.
Yep.
I mean, like
there is at the moment a very simple moderation system, but it can be expanded arbitrarily to whatever complexity necessary.
But is it like the moderation is towards the stuff that is purely illegal? Like don't want to use the word because maybe they are shadow banned on the YouTube, but which is obvious, the stuff that is visible on the dark web. So you kind of ban this, but is it like also the moderation for hate speech? Or
yeah, so it follows like a standard. So we had to get a lot of legal advice before launching the service for obvious reasons, because you're not liable as a service, but you do have because it's user generated content, right? But you do have a target painted on your back as developers, to some extent, for even being involved in running it or whatever. So we had to get quite a lot of advice to get some terms of service, and obviously we're kind of also going to rebuild some functionality on the name service. That's also part of the roadmap, although they're separate services. We're kind of the same people working on both, even though they're sort of separate. So we have basically a set of moderation guidelines that are based off of the best practice. I think are primarily European and American law,
Hmm.
in terms of the things that are going to get people, and that includes users, in trouble,
So
as moderation
essentially,
categories.
legal, illegal, not necessarily the, because I understand what people are concerned. For example, what they say being woke, right? So that the wokeness maybe dominates on Twitter or on certain parts. It's not about this. It's about the legality of what
Yeah,
you
although I
say,
would say
right?
that, the idea that wokeness dominates on Twitter is like, I think the people that are upset about that,
That's when you notice it. I personally didn't really get affected by this.
yeah,
I feel
I
quite
notice more
free.
people complaining about wokeness than I do people
Hmm.
actually. I see plenty of Nazis on Twitter, so I don't really know,
Yeah, yeah.
and YouTube and wherever. Like, so I I'm not sure I really buy. But then look, I come from a left wing European tradition where I believe no platforming. Like, my personal opinion, this is not something necessarily I think would
Hmm.
extend to
Yeah.
something that I would build out. But like, my personal opinion is that, like, no platforming is fine, and no platforming is actually a perfectly valid means of disrupting, for example,
Hmm.
Nazis and people like that that would kind of seek to destroy democratic institutions or undermine or argue in bad faith. Like, I don't really have a problem with that. I come from a radical student tradition, so um, but so yeah, and again, purely legally, hate speech of various kinds in our jurisdiction where we live and are liable, is illegal. So, and also,
Hmm.
things like in Germany, anti-Semitism illegal. So, and we're still bound to some extent by European law here. So there are a whole
Hmm.
bunch of categories where it is like a legal thing where we have to have some controls around it, but it's still down to the discretion of moderators fundamentally.
Hmm.
Um, so one of the things that actually Max Juno from the Juno community was pretty useful with, for us in the early days, was talking about how we might actually run essentially what you would now call maybe a sub DAO,
Hmm.
as it is on Juno, of moderators to actually enforce some
Hmm.
sensible moderation categories, like the
Hmm.
absolute basics of,
But how
like,
how sorry. um so you have the certain views, right? And you have the certain ideologies, because obviously you are all biased, like we
yeah,
cannot avoid this.
exactly,
And
100%.
you are founder of How Social, and probably will be the leading face of How Social as the co-founder. Will your views could your views and what you believe influence with for how you can maybe shadow ban the people that spread ideology that you think is not good ideology?
Well, you can't shadow ban anybody because it's on chain, right? So,
So
e- e-
yeah, that's
ev-
why I'm.
even if I was a moderator, which I'm not, um, I would have to put my reasoning on for banning somebody. So, look, if somebody does something where they put,
Yeah.
if somebody like literally says something anti-Semitic, then
Hmm.
that will get banned in the moderation category for illegal hate speech
Hmm.
because it's illegal. And the moderator just goes like, bam, there is the category.
Yeah.
It's cut and dry.
So who
Right.
will be moderators?
Well, there is a whole bunch of stuff that we need to do around this for mainnet.
Hmm.
Um, and we are talking to some people about how we're actually going to work out how that works and how we're going to do the incentives around it. Um, there's also some other stuff that we're going to do in testnet, which is we've got a bunch of challenges on testnet,
Hmm.
which are going to be published at the beginning of next week, which are basically around different ways of breaking Howl, mainly through the economic incentives, because we basically want to incentivize people to try and break it in the silliest ways possible,
Hmm.
like accumulate the most stake, accumulate the most followers, like by any means necessary. You know what I mean? Um, by kind of like become the biggest recipient of Howl pay, so like the biggest influencer, if you like. So we're going to do a bunch of challenges like that, where we basically say that the stuff is like, what's it called? We just want people to like break the economic incentives mechanisms by working out how to game it, and then we'll kind of see how it thrashes out.
I want to say, every time you say something against a certain religious group, the other religious group might come up. Hey, will you protect the other group against something? So the Carol is asking, will something against Christians will be banned? Right.
It's moderated discretion, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, they've got to put their reasoning on chain. It's so. I use the example of anti-Semitism because it is literally illegal in a bunch of jurisdictions, and it is not illegal to say something about Christian people in Germany, but it is illegal. Well, actually, to be fair, it's not illegal. It's not illegal to say something about Jewish people. It's actually mainly Holocaust denial is illegal in Germany.
Yeah.
That's the one that sticks in my head.
I guess
Moderation happens on chain.
Offensive description of someone based on their race or religious beliefs is offensive, right? So like, regardless of what religion it is or what background, if you offend in the certain background, race or religion, that's offensive, and probably equal for all sides, you know.
I mean, but this is also part of what people are going to have to kind of like work out, isn't it? Because it's kind of like, there's that Salman Rushdie quote, isn't there, where it's like, what is freedom of speech? Without freedom to offend, it doesn't exist. And I think like there's always a kind of tension between what is the limit of kind of, I suppose, respect is what it boils down to, right? Because you want to be able to express yourself, but you would also want the same amount of respect back from other people that you would like to give them, right? And the problem I think with a lot of the way we talk about freedom of speech is that we're kind of always talking about it in the space where there's bad actors who are looking to essentially game the system. Everybody, like the majority of people, are actually quite polite and respectful to one another, and then people come in and sort of break that because they're essentially engaging in bad faith. And I guess I'm coming to this from a space of, I'm less interested in the freedom of speech angle. I literally don't really give a fuck, is my honest answer. Is like, the moderation system, we'll sort out the incentives for it, and then hopefully it will work in a way that is amenable to the community, but is also tenable from the perspective of nobody going to prison over it. But the main thing that, from my point of view, which again, my background, econ and stuff, is like, I think people are always going to say nasty stuff to each other on the internet. I think, if somebody's like, I'm going to shoot a bunch of people, and then they go and do it, then like, obviously that's fucking horrible. And that's when I'm like, okay, well, we bear a burden of responsibility for that. That would be pretty fucking bad, but like, the main goal of the service is about the economic incentives around the monetization of content that creators have made, and less about, can I post my racist views online? Couldn't give a shit about that.
So yeah, that's a good, because like some there is some, like, maybe, I don't want to offend anyone, some twisted ideologies among gaming groups, and this exists also in crypto. So what you doing here, you're not some like sort of like, hey, I give you freedom. I'm building this because I want to incentivize creators, and I want to give power in your hands. That's the main goal.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I guess our agenda, broadly speaking, is actually anti-corporatist. It's not freedom of speech. It's actually anti-corporation. And decentralized. I guess it's also back to like, yeah, I suppose, like, virtue signaling versus actually doing the thing. And I think like the thing that we're trying to do is not like, is experiment with systems that are actually decentralizing something by taking out the centralizing influence of advertising. Whether or not it runs on Juno blockchain, which is in some ways centralized, blah blah blah. But like, we're trying to see whether or not we can actually build an economic system that is sustainable, even if it's just a very tiny microcosm of something that would actually be sophisticated enough to carry forward. And all of the other things that are I guess, required to get that out of the door. Like all of the things that are required to get that out of the door, like we've obviously built, but everything will need to be improved in time. That's kind of
So
basically.
Carol is asking, so all the extreme right-wing Jewish people will be allowed because it's not illegal. It was just example,
This
Carol.
is actually
It
like
wasn't really, but
this is also like an example of the kind of bad faith arguing that I'm talking about. Like
yeah,
the majority of yeah, I just don't really give a fuck about that argument.
you
Like
know,
it's like, yes, I also have a problem. I assume when you say like really right wing I mean, fucking hell, like there's every single religious group and social group has its extremists, and they're all
Mhm.
equally a pain in the ass, and they all equally fuck up the social contract, and they're all going to work out a way of posting stuff online that's horrible, and then it's up to the community to decide what is acceptable and what isn't.
Also, like I don't like description. So like extreme right wing, that doesn't necessarily contains the racism within itself, because you can consider someone extreme right wing for like being maybe economically extreme right wing, which is doesn't necessarily offensive, right? I
Yeah,
mean, so it's I don't like this category. I want to say, like, personally, I do not identify as the left wing. I did sometimes vote for example, my city politician is left. I voted for him, right? But ideologically, like, I am not left in the sorry, in economically, I'm not left. I always say people, I'm capitalist, right? But
yeah,
socially, I'm probably more towards, like, I just don't care what people do personally. And just like I don't even like see the issues ideologically anywhere. So some people call me left wing, some people call me like, most people call me left wing, and I always say no, 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 I'm conservative because I like minimal government.
yeah,
But
fine. But again, it's like,
but
I guess it's getting bogged down in stuff that is fundamentally intractable because it's about social dynamics, and every platform can try and do things a certain way. There is a minimum
Mhm.
amount of stuff that you actually just need to do, and then beyond that point, it's whether or not it's actually viable in the long run.
So
And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. um
Tyson, sorry, I do believe the Orthodox Jewish transsexual vegans are fully allowed on the platform.
yeah,
So,
why wouldn't they be?
um, so 10 more minutes, okay? I have few questions, but because
Yeah,
in
I
40
noticed there's
minutes.
also a question about would it be possible to build a custom front end. Yeah, you can build a custom front end. There is some stuff that the moderation hooks are all applied within the moderation hooks are all applied within the actual post contract. So depending on what the type of infraction is, it might not be displayable because the
Mhm,
what's returned from the contract, like obviously we thought of this, what's returned on the contract depends on the moderation status of things,
mhm, mhm.
is the answer to that.
I have the question. Dense, like the names. You said that the value, the names, the value is more in the names itself. So,
Yeah.
uh, do you feel this will be like the main naming platform? Maybe not only in Juno, but in more like of the broader IBC. I spoke to Shane from Stargaze. I know he did plan to do their own naming service on Stargaze as well. But I wonder, like, do you think this name service will be adapted, and where's the main utility for this? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I suppose is that, we built out Howl as an example in some ways,
Mhm,
that initially, of an example of how you could use the name service as a login layer
mhm,
for a different type of protocol. Um, and hopefully other people will see that if you engage with it, you can bring on board some users and you can have them experiment around with the service. Um, Kind of that simple, really. I think that
yeah.
there are a bunch of different implementations of name services in the cosmos. None of them are ideal, none of them are
Mhm,
perfect, and the one that ends up being the dominant one in the Cosmos will probably be whichever one has the most users. It'll be as simple as that.
Hmm.
And I don't know which one that will be.
And you
Um,
do have a lot of users,
we do
right?
have a lot of users, so that I
Hmm.
think is the primary advantage. And I would say if there's not a good, this is the obviously we're biased, right? But if you don't have a good reason to build it out on your own platform, Juno's an ICA host chain.
Hmm.
You can just, if you're a smart contract, you can obviously just issue it. You will be able to issue an
Hmm.
ICQ query, an interchain query before too long to just query the name service natively. And at the moment, there's also a Web2 API if you want to just build it into a UI. Um,
Hmm.
so there's two ways of integrating with it if you want to do that. If you want to implement your own, that's also fine. You know, it's all open source software. Who cares? Longer term, I think naming is actually a big underserved problem in Cosmos that hasn't been
Hmm.
solved, and um, I have lots of thoughts on that. I know there are lots of smart people also working on DID implementations and stuff like that. Maybe something cool will come out of all of that stuff. We also have an idea of a roadmap for the name service that we're going to take forward as well. So, we'll see.
So you also you don't just drop the name service. You still develop it and want to be a viable part of the ecosystem, right?
Yeah,
Like.
I mean, it's a one of the things that we're doing is that we've been completely focused on Howl for like 4 months,
Hmm.
5 months, but we've been doing like small things on the UI and stuff like that. Um, and we're going to do more stuff on that
Yeah.
moving forward. So again, yeah, it's kind of one of those that the three of us are going to do some more work on it.
Hmm.
And they are separate projects with separate roadmaps as well. One of the thing actually, to be honest, with the name service at the moment is there's less development effort going on. A lot of it's quite like business development-y, talking
Hmm.
to other teams and being like, you know, um, how would we integrate? Why would we want to do that? And a lot of that from talking to other teams, I think the thing that we kind of see, I suppose, is that the I guess from obviously I'm very attached to it as it's the first project that I launched on Juno, and the Needlecast kind of worked on. The majority of the work was kind of like out of my pocket, I guess. And then obviously some additional contributors like Zeke, who's also super involved in DAO, really smart guy.
I have interview with Zeke in 35 minutes.
Right, exactly. Like really, really smart guy. Did like a big
I
chunk of the
will.
UI work on the first version
Hmm.
of the name service, and also contributed quite a lot of thinking. Else Howl, who I think you've talked to as well,
Yeah.
helped with some of the ideas. He has a different idea of how naming should work in Cosmos. It's not quite how I would do it, but like all interesting guys helping out with that. But like that, yeah, I guess like I'm very attached to that service, and I'm also very attached to the idea of
Yeah.
providing utility to the users. And so a lot of like the business development stuff we've been doing recently
Hmm.
is basically talking to teams and going, look, we have like 20,000 users who are really enthusiastic about Juno and the Cosmos. What can you, because people say like, oh, why should we integrate this? And I'm kind of like, well, look,
Hmm.
we've got like a lot of users and your service doesn't have
Yeah.
any yet. But so what utility can you provide for the people that hold these names? Because if you
Hmm.
provide them a utility, they're going to really like your service. So there have been quite a few interesting conversations on that side of stuff. But to be honest, any larger project that has its own complicated roadmap moves quite slowly in terms of integrations and all that sort of stuff. So there's nothing there that I guess I'm going to talk about at the moment. But that's also a
Um.
focus, I guess. A big focus is like utility of names to name holders.
Yeah. Um. You know, you did speak that the maybe one of the last things I want to touch on. There was a chat about launching the new smart contract platform that will use interchain security. It's called Neutron, and you were saying about the uh, mindshare burnout, that there is not a lot of Cosmoasm developers, and that simply like creating new platforms might be maybe diluting this. Um,
Well, also like why it's kind of like why would they go to that platform over Juno, where Juno already has an existing user base and an enthusiastic community who adopt
Mhm.
new projects, you know?
Have you thought that maybe they might not align with the politics of Juno? Maybe.
It's possible. I mean,
Hmm.
but this is the
Yeah.
kind of, I guess this is kind of the Cosmos way, right? You know, people just should if they have a
Yeah.
thing they want to do and they want to launch it, they should launch it and see how it goes. And it's no skin off anybody else's neck nose. It's a very big tent, and
Yeah.
I wish them success. Because to be honest, like this is the thing, like the more Cosmwasm developers there are, the better from the point of view of
Yeah.
hiring projects, token utility, wider utility in the Cosmos. So I think we all kind of win in the end, you know. Um, but I guess like it's kind of back to the ICS thing. I still think in a lot of ways I'm not sold. I'm certainly not sold on ICS version 1. I am pretty sold on layered ICS, which is I gather coming in
Yeah.
version 2. Um, but for the moment, I guess yeah. For me, the jury's really out on ICS version 1. I kind of think that it's kind of fine to have a validator set.
So my thoughts on ICS. I'm going to tell you. I'm not sure if you will agree. Um. So there is the plan to implement interchain security. So you can launch your own chain that will use the Cosmos hub security, right? And with that, you will be issuing your own token inflation. But there is the problem, because I noticed that there is also plans to adjust the inflation of the atom, potentially lower this. And there is some problem that many crypto people like are completely fixated on inflation, and everyone wants burning tokens, deflationary tokens, without maybe necessarily understanding if this is beneficial or not. But I view it, if the atom has too low inflation, or maybe even hits the deflationary stage, it's not of course the same as the product inflation that we do have, but it's the like as the, let's say, the coin inflation and deflation, right? If it's going to hit that level, and the other chain issue their own inflation, you turning atom into commodity coin instead of the coin that should serve in the broader IBC ecosystem. And with that, turning this into this, it discourages you from actually using atom, but it encourages you to stack the atom, which increases the centralization over these few big holders, because this is such a valuable commodity. And this encourages dumping the other inflationary token into this very scarce commodity atom, which is going to it's madness. What people actually think is good, to me. Not sure if you are aligned with this sort of thinking, but
Yeah,
I
I
do
mean,
think the inflation of atom is totally fine. Like, it's actually good.
yeah, I think this is kind of one of the things actually which would necessitate a Howl chain if we were successful. Is basically that the Juno tokenomics don't work for Howl. Um, I think that the tokenomics of Stargaze are very good for a variety of use cases. Obviously, their case is NFTs, but I think it's very, very well done. I think that the stability of Stargaze at a low but stable level as the crash happened and as it bottomed out and then the bear has kind of shown that that is a reasonable tokenomics. I think, even though it's in a first year and it's actually inflating quite heavily in
Hmm.
terms of token supply. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think that I think I'm broadly aligned with you that the idea that um,
Yeah.
inflation is like totally bad is a bit wrong. It's just flat wrong. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
inflation. The problem is really purchasing price.
Yeah.
Uh, the relative decrease in purchasing price of a commodity is primarily the problem, and that
Yeah.
kind of also comes down to utility because
Mhm.
a token isn't actually currency. It is primarily expressed in terms of utility, which might
Mhm.
be semi fungible in nature, like a currency, but it might also be other things like voting in a DAO. So I think it also comes back to what utility are you providing with your token? as
Mhm.
well, which I think as time goes on, we're going to be more focused on in the space rather than just, worrying about line goes up, I hope.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's actually a whole lot of economics here, and lots of people can talk about it more eloquently than I can. But yeah, I guess the essence of my problem with, I guess, the way central banks work at the moment is primarily the way they don't really seem to give a regard to
Yeah.
the average citizen's experience of purchasing price. I'm not
Yeah.
that bothered about inflation I'm very bothered about deflation. I'm not bothered about inflation. I'm bothered about
Same.
purchasing price. I'm worried
Same.
about people getting physically poorer. That is actually the
Yeah.
problem to me. And the biggest vector, I think, for the problems that we have in modern economies is actually inequality. And that's why it's so concerning, I suppose, that we're kind of recreating systems in
Mhm.
crypto which are hugely centralized in terms of stake and that kind
Yes.
of thing, because that is actually expressing inequality in a new system, which will just lead to people also having a kind of serfdom experience in Web3. And that's also why venture capital in the space, I don't think, is like super helpful.
Mhm.
But that's
Mhm.
a whole other, that's literally, yeah,
I
neither here
do
nor there.
try to learn
But there's a reason
recently
why
about.
we bootstrapped Howl ourselves. We built it on
Mhm.
our own time. We didn't take any VC. There was sniffles of interest here and there, but we
Mhm.
just like, it has to come from a place where we can just give the tokens out and say use it or don't. We obviously have some
Yeah.
tokens as founders, and like we're not ashamed about that. Like we've put in a lot of work for free. um, but equally, our tokens dilute away over time. So we're not moderators. We don't have any special say. The DAO can vote us out if they want, and just vote in new developers at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
as far as possible, we've tried to put ourselves in a position where we're we're in the position that people could tell us to fuck off and we could fuck off.
Yeah. Um. Look. There is the sport you was asking for the integration for Kepler. Is there any
Uh,
for
yeah, we looked. It's a whole other thing. Getting stuff integrated into Kepler is really, really hard. They're
Yeah.
not the only. We've been talking to other wallets as well.
Yeah.
We have all the tools that a wallet would need to resolve the names, and we are talking to various people.
Mhm.
And who knows who will get there? Whoever gets there first as a wallet to integrate the name service will get a load of really excited users.
Yeah.
Which one it will be will depend on which one decides to jump first. Maybe it'll be Kepler, maybe it'll be one of the competitor wallets. We're talking to, we're talking to people at the moment. So
To leap maybe or yeah. Look, The-Frey, by the way, I know, like, the Dimi shield your name when there was interview. Not sure if he called you by name, and I was like, who you talk about?
oh right,
And
yeah, I get
uh
I get periodically doxed by lots of
yeah.
people.
Yeah, you were doxed, not shield on my.
Yeah, yeah.
By the way, I have to run. I need to charge the battery. I
Yeah,
hope it will
this has
get
actually gone on
charged.
by quite a while. I needed to get some code done, and I gather we crashed Juno tools as well. So I
Yeah,
should
like,
probably go
honestly,
help Callum fix that.
I could go on if not the fact that the battery and another interview, because we didn't speak for such a long time. There's more issues on, like, you could
There's a lot of
find in discussions that you
the
can
world. The
bring.
world's got to be put to rights, hasn't it? There's a lot of stuff to talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah. So thank you. It was very very nice conversation. I did enjoy. So
No
thank
worries.
you for giving up on like 2.5 hour of your time. Um, and well, I guess till the next time, right? Take
Yeah,
care, and thank you for everyone who watched that.
yeah. Thanks everybody.